was on the Hill. I'm still a Schlepper, and he became a big cheese. And then, of course, Halie Soifer, who is a legend, who essentially created JDCA as our first CEO and our only CEO. And of course, last but absolutely not least is Liz Schrayer. Liz Schrayer created as the president and CEO of U.S. Global Leadership Coalition. And there is no organization in this country which is more critical, absolutely, hands down, to saving foreign aid and explaining to Congress why foreign assistance is so important to our national security than Liz and the organizations she created. I'm afraid that because you came late, Ambassador Nides, where we are,
and Mary
30, just the record.
I don't have an email.
and finally Tom Nides, and we'll probably let him speak too. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Liz, who is our moderator.
All right. Well, thank you, Beth and Tom. Halie, for first of 12. It is not only wonderful to be here, but as a Schrayer, it is amazing to be in Chicago with my mom and my brother and my sister.
Where's Mom?
Right.
Hey, Mom.
And, you know, for me to be here, not just in Chicago, but to be here in the Federation, in which I think the Schrayer name is all over, is really a blessing. I think my father would be failing to be here at this event, which would bring his two passions together, politics and the Jewish community in Israel. And he would love this. He wouldn't necessarily love some of the difficulties that we're going to talk about today. And we're at a moment where there's so much positive we need to talk about, and the energy in terms of, Halie, what you and JDCA are doing, and also the complexities that we're going to see unfold over the next 4 days in this great city that I grew up in. And personally, I just would say this. I have been going to conventions, both sides, Democrats and Republicans, since 1984. I was 12 now, but I've been going. And this is not the first time that we have by any means seen controversy over the issue of Israel. I still remember in 1988, the way I became dear friends with Madeleine Albright is that was a year that there were challenges on the platform around Israel. We went to state after state after state together. She was the advisor to then Michael Dukakis on foreign policy. And at the national level, I literally remember I was political director at AIPAC, and I remember on the floor of the convention, Superman's Lois Lane, Margot Kidder, you may remember, walked across the convention with big signs trying to criticize the very good pro-Israel platform with a big sign that said, you know, for Palestinian self-determination. And I learned then, and we're going to talk about it, I learned then what happens when you have very good substance, a pro-Israel platform, but what happens when you have challenging visuals. Like, let's say, a protester protesting just down the street. So there's a lot to talk about. We have three fabulous experts here, and we're going to unpack the nexus between politics in Israel, the administration, and what they have been doing, this new ticket that we now have had for the last just few weeks. And there's a lot happening in Israel literally just hours ago. Tom, I'm going to start with you. We too have been friends, Tom Kahn, wherever you are, for, we're not going to say how long, but a long, long time. And
I was your intern, I think.
or I was yours, who knows? Few people know the Biden-Harris record on Israel better than you. You served as you were just introduced as the U.S. ambassador to Israel. I think a month or so ago at the JDCA summit, I asked you a question, moderating a conversation not unlike today, where I said, do you trust Joe Biden on Israel? And you said unequivocally, he feels it in his kishka. Now we have a different ticket. So I'm going to start pretty strongly here of saying, Kamala Harris, do you trust her on Israel? And I'm going to ask, how do you see the Harris-Walz potential administration the same or different than a Biden-Harris administration? Help us with the big question that a lot of our Jewish friends seem to be asking each other.
Well, first of all, I apologize for being late, but I promise you I could read you the email. It says 3:30, so I just want my poor driver's about to have a heart attack out there. Anyway, I was at a Clinton reunion, and I left before Clinton even spoke. There you go. I got.
Is he still talking?
No, he hasn't started yet, and Hillary hasn't either. But I got you called me. I'm like, oh God, I gotta leave. Anyway, let me just. First of all, and Liz and I have known each other for a billion years, and she and I have been friends and worked on these issues. And unlike Liz, I've actually never been to a Republican convention.
They're very different.
But I've been to many Democratic conventions. I want to, before I start talking about, first of all, the answer is 100% yes on the vice president. But I want to, before I get in and diving into this, we must step back for a minute and just understand what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have done here. Really in the last, since Biden has been president, but really in the last, since October 7th. I remind everyone I talk to, it was Joe Biden who went to Israel 5 days after October 7th and embraced Bibi Netanyahu and basically said to the enemies of Israel, which are the Iranians and Hamas and Hezbollah, basically don't screw with them. I've got your back. And which has been basically, may not have said it exactly those terms, but you know what I mean. And time in and time again, both Biden and Harris collectively have over the last year have shown to the American people and to Israel's enemies that they have Israel's back, including for the second time in less than 4 months, they have sent ships into the Mediterranean, big, huge ships with big, huge helicopters and airplanes with lots of guns and lots of people pointed at Iran and said, don't you think about doing something because we have Israel's back. And in every single one of those meetings that President Biden has been in, Kamala Harris has been at his side. In every single phone call that Joe Biden has made to Bibi Netanyahu, and those aren't always pleasant phone calls, the vice president has been in those rooms or on the phone, which is highly unusual, by the way. It's not a normal way to operate. And so I have, over the last 2.5, 3 years, certainly when I was ambassador and spending a lot of time since then, I spent a lot of time with the vice president and with Doug Emhoff to talk about these issues. And I have 100% confidence of her support for the security of the state of Israel. Let us also be clear, though. She's not Joe Biden, okay? She's not Joe Biden. I mean, Joe Biden is of a different age, of a different generation. I love him dearly, but she's not Joe Biden. And that's okay, because if we have any hopes whatsoever, whatever, for many of us have kids in this room or grandkids in this room who understand the following conversation. When you sit down with them and try to explain why it's important to support the state of Israel. Some of even my kids, okay, have pushed me back on these issues. And there's no better person who can articulate the views of why Israel needs to be secure and the importance of it for this next generation than Kamala Harris, okay? She is the bridge to the future. If we have any hope whatsoever to turn this tide of what's going on right now, we should all recognize that we're in a very deep hole. It's her face and her positions and her views of the state of Israel, which I strongly believe is the only hope we have, in my humble view, of turning the kids that are under 30 years old back in support of the state of Israel and the security of the state of Israel. So the answer is 100% yes, and I'm honored to be working with her and her husband and hopefully the next president of the United States.
I'm sure there are going to be some questions to unpack what you just said, but thank you for kicking it off. And Halie, I'm going to come to you because you actually not only know her, but work with the vice president before she was in the White House. You served as then Senator Harris's national security advisor. You actually traveled, as I understand it, with her, then Senator, and now second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, to Israel. You worked with both of them, but particularly the second gentleman, on the anti-Semitism task force. So you have a very unique perspective, not only on what kind of picking up on what Tom just said on her views on Israel, but actually her views on foreign policy at large. So not only share and build on whatever you think in terms of what Tom just added, but what should voters know about Vice President Harris's and potentially President Harris's views on foreign policy and on Israel? What's your inside look on this?
Well, thank you, Liz. Thanks to everyone for being here. It means a lot for JDCA that we are convening Jews coming to this convention. We have members of our community from around the country. We have members of our community from Chicago here. We have members of the press. We're just really proud to convene here. And we also want to thank the Federation for hosting us. So JDCA, as was said at the outset, is the political voice and home of Jewish voters from around the country in support of Democrats who share our values. And of course, that includes support of Israel, as well as every other issue that we know are important to Jewish voters: combating extremism and anti-Semitism, defending our democracy, defending our rights, protecting our environment, and defending our communities against the epidemic of gun violence. And on all of these issues, Kamala Harris stands with us. We have seen it firsthand. I have seen it firsthand, as Liz mentioned. So I arrived in the Senate the same month that Kamala Harris did in January of 2017. We all remember it well. It happened to be the first month of the Trump administration. Every day kind of felt like we had rockets launched our way, and figuratively, in terms of huge policy changes being made. And we were quite steadfast, I have to say, even though she had just arrived in Washington, in building up defenses in terms of what she saw as policies that were really antithetical to our values on all the issues that I mentioned. As it relates to Israel, Kamala Harris is a strong and staunch supporter of the military relationship between Israel and the United States. She, of course, has served in that role as vice president. But what I can tell you is she came into this White House with views that are completely aligned with those of President Biden. She came into the Senate with views that are just as strong as they are today. I traveled to Israel with her in November of 2017. It was not your average CODEL. Typically, when you take a member of Congress to Israel, they have a lot of meetings in Jerusalem, they're sitting around a table, and then they go to the next conference room and the next meeting, and so on. She decided she wanted to see every aspect of the U.S. Israel relationship. We went down to Beersheba. She was doing work on behalf of the Homeland Security Committee looking at cybersecurity. We met with the startups in Startup Nation. She met with government officials that were overseeing cybersecurity. She met with officials looking at the issue of water preservation, because as the senator from California, this was a very important issue. She went to Ashkelon and met with those that were overseeing the Iron Dome batteries to understand that painstaking decision that's made within a matter of milliseconds about whether or not to intercept those rockets that are coming toward Israel. And yes, of course, she met with Prime Minister Netanyahu. At the time, she met with opposition leader, now President Herzog, who really gave her a tour de force of Israel's democracy in the Knesset. And what I saw was not just her deep commitment to every aspect of the U.S.-Israel relationship, but also her understanding of it, both as a then senator, now vice president, but also personally, the connection. It was the second gentleman's first trip to Israel. And I vividly remember when they approached the Kotel for the first time. And ever prepared as she is, she not just had a kippah in her pocket, she had the clips to fasten it to his head. It was really a special moment that for me symbolized not just how deeply she felt the connection between the United States and Israel, but between the Jewish community and Israel, of which she is a part. And it is with a great deal of pride that they hung a mezuzah on that door of the vice president's residence. And the second gentleman has said to us, they will be hanging one on the White House. And, you know, the only thing better than the first Jewish second gentleman is the first Jewish first gentleman. But it's, but it's important to recognize that Kamala Harris's ties to the Jewish community and to Israel run deep. She is a part of our community through the second gentleman. I had the honor of going with Ambassador Nides this year to sit at their Passover Seder. She understands and feels those connections to our community. And it's also because of that that she has been such a leader in this White House in efforts to combat anti-Semitism. So.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Michael, I want to bring you in to, we've been talking about the who. Who is she? What's, you know, as I said, what's in her kishkas, as using Tom's phrase. But let's shift to the what. And I, as given your policy expertise, I actually asked a question similar to what I'm about to ask you in Milwaukee to a different panel, because whoever is elected president is going to have to deal with a series of questions and a series of issues. They're going to have to deal with the day after Gaza. In let's pray that there is a day after and the war ends at some point soon, and we'll talk about that. I have some questions about that. Normalization with Saudi Arabia is maybe it will happen before January 20th or soon after. They're going to have to, the next president is going to have to continue to build and strengthen a coalition around countering Iran. How do you see a Harris-Walz administration dealing with those or any other issues you want to bring up?
Thanks, Liz. And thanks to JDCA for having me here. So, as you know, there are a number of real serious foreign policy issues that are going to come into play once this election is decided. And the one that is right in front of our faces, of course, is this question about how Gaza gets resolved. Today, Secretary of State Blinken met with Prime Minister Netanyahu. After that meeting, the United States and Israel seem to be on the same page with regard to a framework to get a hostage deal and ceasefire. Hopefully, Hamas will cooperate, although I wouldn't necessarily put money on it. But at some point, the war in Gaza is going to come to some sort of halt. And what happens next is a real question. And to me, the most important factor here is that when the fighting comes to an end, there are a lot of questions that have to be answered, and they're going to require a lot of investment. There is the question, first and foremost, of how you safeguard Israel's security in a post-October 7th environment where you're likely to have some remnants of Hamas still in Gaza. There's a question of what's going to happen to the Palestinians who are in Gaza. Are they going to remain in the south? Are they going to move back north? What is going to happen to their welfare? Who's going to rebuild Gaza and put it back together? Who's going to marshal an international coalition to make sure that there is some sort of governance on the day after, that security in Gaza for Israel and for Palestinians is taken care of? These are all things that are going to require lots of investment, and investment in diplomacy, investment in U.S. money and U.S. time, investment in marshaling other countries in the region to pitch in and be on the same page. There is no substitute for U.S. leadership in this regard. I'm pretty confident that if we have a Harris administration, there will be real dedication to these issues and some real thought given to what has to happen on the day after in Gaza. There is a scenario in which the fighting can end and the U.S. can wash its hands and say, all right, we got to a ceasefire. We were able to get hostages back. Now it's not our problem anymore. That is one potential pathway, but I think that the pathway that makes far more sense for U.S. policy is one in which we have deep U.S. investment and commitment. And I think that all the signs we've seen so far from Vice President Harris indicates that if she is the president, she will be willing to think through these issues and to instruct her team to put the hard work in to make sure that they get resolved and that Israel is not left on its own to figure these issues out. I think we're in a similar situation with regard to normalization with Saudi Arabia and hopefully with other countries throughout the region. And here there's another important wrinkle, which is that not only do you need continued U.S. investment in diplomacy and a willingness to make a very difficult regional deal happen, there are things that the Saudis are going to require to normalize with Israel that the U.S. certainly can help with and that the U.S. is going to have to push for. One of those things is going to have to be some sort of progress toward a political resolution between Israel and the Palestinians. Now, of course, there's all sorts of talk, always, but particularly since October 7th, and in this country especially, about a two-state outcome. We're far from that. And I say that as the chief policy officer of an organization whose mission is to get to a two-state outcome. But despite the fact that we are far from that, we still need real progress on that. We need progress on that from a matter of U.S. policy. We need progress on that for Israel if we care about a secure Jewish and democratic state. And when we talk about normalization, most critically, the Saudis need to see some sort of progress toward political resolution. It's not going to be a full two-state outcome. It's not going to be a full resolution to the conflict, but some sort of movement in that direction is necessary. It's necessary for the politics, the domestic politics in Saudi Arabia, and it's necessary for the regional politics in the Middle East. I'm certain that President Harris is going to be committed toward moving toward two states, figuring out how we can get the Israelis and the Palestinians to move in this direction, all of which is going to unlock progress toward normalization. And I think that without that factor, which is something that I'm sure President Harris will bring to the table, normalization may happen down the road, but it's going to take a lot longer. And I think that this is an issue that really is critical to make progress on as quickly as we can.
Can I jump in here 1 second?
My question is on this.
Okay,
but
wait, but here, let me just,
Okay.
wait, I want to, who cares about questions? But okay, so here's my question.
This is why I love telling
Listen, Mike, I totally agree with you, but I want to make sure everyone understands how important this is, okay? As someone who came to Israel and talked about the Abraham Accords, listen, it was done by Donald Trump, and there's not many things I actually agreed with Donald Trump, but the Abraham Accords was a huge success. And everywhere I went, I talked about the importance of the Abraham Accords, Morocco and the Emirates and Bahrain. It changed really the beginning of the face of the Middle East. We've got to get this Saudi normalization done. Now, at what price we'll have to talk about. But it's not just Saudi Arabia. It's the rest of the Muslim world. It's Indonesia, it's Malaysia, it's Qatar, it's Kuwait. The impact of this is beyond, it makes the Abraham Accords look like small ball if we can get this done. Yes, we have to figure out how we do it, but the only way we're going to do it, in my humble view, it's got to be done. It's not a partisan comment. This is a factual. For those of you who understand, we need to get a treaty out of the United States Senate for Saudi Arabia. That's what they want. They want like a NATO-like security blanket, not Article 5, but like Article 2.2, something smaller than Article 5. It's going to take 67 votes in the United States Senate to get that. And any of you who are math geniuses will understand the best case scenario is for in the Senate this time. Maybe if Chuck Schumer was here, he'd say, of course, we're going to keep the control of the Senate. But hypothetically, that may not be the case. But if that's the case, we're going to need at least 15 or 16 Democrats to support this. Okay, that's going to support this. And the only way that's going to happen, in my view, is to have either get done during a lame duck while Biden is still president, or President Harris. So for people who think about the importance of the security of the state of Israel and thinking about this issue of what do I want normalization, we need to have a Democratic president to get the normalization, which is only good for the security of the state of Israel.
All right,
I'm sorry.
No, keep the mic, because this is exactly what I wanted to ask you. Two-part question. One is on this. President Biden, who's we all know is going to speak tonight, but one of the things he has said is that he wants to use now the next 5 months to do some big things. And on the list is some things in the Middle East. Obviously, he wants to see the war end, but the Saudi normalization is one of them. Do you think there's a chance to get something done? And then my second part of the question is, continue what Michael just talked about. You are in the know, you're talking to Tony and Jake and all these folks all the time. What do you think's happening right now on the ground today? We all saw Secretary Blinken on television saying that Israel has accepted this deal. You and I talked last week, about this. What's your sense?
Is this, I guess it's not off the record.
It is not off the record.
It is not
off the
Okay,
record.
okay.
There
Well,
is
it's on the
press
record.
here.
Okay, whatever. So let's step back. Let me be clear to you, okay? This president is going to do whatever he possibly can do to get this hostages home, okay? He is obsessed by this, okay? I talked to the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor and all my friends at the White House. He is committed to get this done, not only for the hostage families, okay, but he believes this war needs to come to an end, okay? And I think he cares about this deeply, and he and the Vice President are spending an inordinate amount of time on this topic. In fact, many of the people in national security would like him to focus on other things around the world. He wants to get this hostage deal done. He wants the war to end. And yes, he does believe that there is a possibility and opening to also get to normalization. I know that's a little bit like, oh my God, how are you going to go from here to here to here? But that's the only way things get done in Washington. You got to have deadlines. You got to have like focus. So I think there is an opportunity and an option here. I think what's going on the ground is, remember what I said at the beginning. We have a lot of assets sitting in the Mediterranean right now, protecting the state of Israel, way beyond anyone's understanding, okay? Carrillo, who's the head of CENTCOM, is sitting again in Tel Aviv for the second time in 2 months to protect the state of Israel. And we're saying—
that's the general of CENTCOM.
I'm sorry, General CENTCOM. He's the boss. And, well, the president's the boss, but you know what I mean. But the reality of this is that there is an enormous amount of pressure being put on the prime minister as well as Hamas, because it's not about squeezing Netanyahu. It's also making sure that they squeeze the Qataris and the Egyptians and to put the pressure on Shinwar to get this deal done. I don't know. I think it's if it doesn't happen now, I don't know if it'll ever happen. Okay, it needs to happen now. We have an opening to get this done.
And Secretary Blinken basically said that. And I'm going to ask both of you a similar question. You're from Minnesota. That means you might have a knowledge of the vice presidential nominee. There has been a lot being talked about, and from the New York Post to elsewhere, of what he says or doesn't say, believes or doesn't believe when it comes to Israel. I want your comment on that. And then I'm going to ask Michael a comment on this anti-Semitic campaign about Governor Shapiro. So I'm going to come to you next. But first, what do we know about
all I know is I picked up the phone and called all my Jewish friends in Minnesota, and there are Jews from Minnesota, by the way. Is anyone here?
Beth is here. Beth.
So when Beth and I talked about this, it was within 16 hours that she produced a letter of, I don't know, there must have been 70 people on that letter. Many of the rabbis, all the Jewish lay leaders, all the people that signed on to support Tim Walz. Listen, he's not Jewish, obviously. He is from Minnesota. To be clear, I think there's not anyone would suggest that not only is he going to be a friend of Israel, but he's going to be an advocate for the state of Israel and the security of the state of Israel. One of the reasons is also his military career. Listen, here's a guy who spent 25 years in the military. He understands the importance that Israel plays in the Middle East and for the security of not only Israel, but of course the state of the United States and in the region. So he understands Israel being our ally, and understands the importance of that. So not only is he supportive of obviously the importance of the state of Israel for the Jewish people, but he also understands it from a national security perspective as well.
Thanks. Michael, you wrote an article about the anti-Semitism that surfaced in the context of Governor Josh Shapiro, the selection process around the vice presidential selection process as it related to Governor Josh Shapiro. And I want to read what Michael wrote, and I want to ask you about it. You concluded, quote, "The best thing that can happen moving forward is for the forces behind the anti-Shapiro campaign to see that their efforts were meaningless, and that the liberal Zionism that has been a Democratic hallmark remains ensconced as a core policy pillar while they are relegated to the sidelines." So we've read a lot about, some of this may have come from the Republican side. Tell us about these forces that you are seeing and what either did or didn't happen as you see it as it relates to Governor Shapiro.
So I'm not privy to any of the inside reasons why Tim Walz was picked over Josh Shapiro. I think that there are hundreds of good reasons to pick Walz. There are hundreds of good reasons to pick Shapiro. And I have no doubt, as Governor Shapiro said, I think actually just today or yesterday, I have no doubt that there was no anti-Semitism involved in deciding to go with one over the other. But there was a really ugly campaign that everybody here saw when Vice President Harris was deciding who to select. And that campaign looked at the finalists, all of whom had virtually indistinguishable public positions on Israel, but only one of whom, Josh Shapiro, was Jewish. And only one of them, Josh Shapiro, was saddled with a nickname like Genocide Josh. Only one of them was the target of a campaign and protest to make sure that he was not selected. This is not okay. It wouldn't be okay anywhere. It's certainly not okay in the United States in 2024. And so I think that making sure that we beat back any type of campaign that says, because you are Jewish, somehow you are not acceptable in public life, and because you are a Zionist, you're somehow not acceptable in public life, this shouldn't be something that anybody tolerates anywhere. Now, I think there's something else going on with the Josh Shapiro incident, and it isn't just about anti-Semitism, it's also about what are the acceptable positions to hold on Israel. And there are folks on the far left and on the far right who look at Josh Shapiro, who is a mainstream liberal Zionist, holds the positions of somewhere between, if you look at polling, 70 and 90% of American Jews, who holds positions that would be on the left side of the Israeli political spectrum, but would not put him outside of a basic Israeli consensus. And the notion that someone like that was treif because he supports Zionism and because he supports two states is outrageous. And I have to say that we're seeing it actually right now, even beyond Josh Shapiro, coming from the right when it comes to my friend and former Israel Policy Forum colleague, Ilan Goldenberg, who was named as the Jewish liaison for the Harris campaign. And what have we seen since? We've seen attacks on Ilan saying because Ilan supports two states, somehow he is not sufficiently pro-Israel. And somehow if you support any sort of diplomatic resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, then you are selling out Israel's security. And I think beating back against this paradigm, where only if you are on the very far left and you support a non-Zionist single state between the river and the sea, or only if you are on the far right and you support a single Jewish state between the river and the sea, no matter what happens and no matter who the Palestinian leadership is down the road, if this becomes the litmus test for pro-Israel, we're all going to be in big trouble, as will this country, as will the state of Israel. So I think it's important to really tackle the extremes here and make sure that what are mainstream sensible positions do not get tarred as being out of the mainstream or out of polite public discourse.
Great point. Terrific point. So I'm going to open it up to questions, but I'm going to end with one last question, which I think is on a really positive note. And that is what's in the Democratic platform. And as I said, I gave you the example of 1988, where the platform was great and the visuals were not. And what did everybody remember? They remember the visuals. You're going to work hard to tell everybody what's in the Democratic platform. You testified before the Democratic Party Platform Committee. That is a fun thing to do. You can tell about what do voters need to know about what is in the Democratic platform when it comes to the issue we are talking about, Israel.
Great. This is good news. This is good news because I think in an hour or two,
they're going to vote. They're actually
going to be voting,
the
and they will be adopting the platform.
The Republicans did a 16-page
and
platform, and the Republican
it had a bullet that basically said we support Israel.
This is somewhere around 90 pages.
We will be adopting a 90-page platform that was finalized. It was finalized in July. It is the most pro-Israel platform that I've certainly ever seen. And we had a very strong platform in 2020. Keep in mind, in 2020, the Republicans had no platform. They had a press release that said, we support whatever our dear leader Donald Trump says. This time they had some sort of bullet point situation. We have 3 pages of this 90-page platform dedicated to Israel. Starts on page 72 if you're following along. And this is how it's stronger than it was in 2020. A lot has happened since 2020. In 2020, of course, it affirmed U.S. support for the commitment that we made in the 2016 Memorandum of Understanding, 10 years, $3.8 billion in military aid to Israel. It reaffirms that again, but it also recognizes that since October 7th, we've made commitments that go beyond that. This year, we gave Israel an additional $4.3 billion in military assistance, additional assistance even on top of that. It reaffirms the importance of that. It recognizes what happened on October 7th. It unequivocally condemns the terror that we saw perpetrated that day, including the sexual violence. And I should mention on that issue in particular, this is an issue where the vice president has distinguished her voice somewhat from that of the president in that she held an event at the White House in June on the issue of sexual violence because it was an issue for too long that the international community had turned a blind eye to. And she had an event, I was honored to be there, where she brought up victims to talk about the issue and to condemn Hamas's use of rape as a weapon of war. That condemnation is also in this platform. It talks about the importance of a ceasefire. It recognizes the urgent importance of releasing the hostages. It talks about the importance of continuing to have humanitarian assistance delivered to innocent Palestinians in Gaza, and it recognizes the vital importance of the U.S. Israel relationship. But it doesn't stop there. Again, it's 3 pages. It also, for the first time, includes a section on anti-Semitism. We've never had a section on anti-Semitism. A dedicated section of this platform talks about the administration's efforts to counter anti-Semitism with the historic strategy that they created and have now implemented and strengthened since October 7th, the first national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. And it talks about that as well. Now, again, I mentioned this platform was finalized in July, which is interesting because Kamala Harris was not the candidate in that at the time. So there were a lot of references, of course, as you can imagine, to President Biden. So I was wondering, as many of you might have been as well, or maybe not if you weren't following page 72, what might happen? You want to know what happened? Nothing. The platform that was accepted and adopted unanimously by the drafting committee and then the whole platform committee remains intact. Same thing. Maybe they made a few modifications to talk more about the vice president, of course, who shares the policies of the president. But it is just as strong as it's been, and I look forward to being adopted in a few hours.
That's a good story to tell. All right, let's open. Well, first, there's so much richness in what the 3 of them just added. And so please open up the questions, introduce yourself, and questions, not statements. And I have to start with my brother. So,
very proud brother.
but I think Bobby's going to come around with that. And
Got
there
a
you
mic up there too.
repeat the first part.
So we know where to go, and we'll bring you a mic. So
Okay, we'll go here and then over there. And then there's one over there.
Chicago, very proud brother. We're seeing on social media, people from the far left, from the pro-Palestinian community, sort of trying to get gotchas, getting Vice President Harris to say things like she might be willing to meet with the Palestinians, or she might be willing to do things, or she's going to talk about it as a win. And now our friends that were more right than we are, perhaps, are saying, she's going to give in. What kind of ammunition can we have? We need information to tell our friends that probably would vote for us, except they're worried about Israel, what to say. What's the deal?
Do you mind if I take it for a moment? Okay, so I think it is really important to acknowledge that there is there's a very active disinformation campaign that's happening, and it is quite robust. Social media, right-wing TikTokers and others who are, could I have another mic? Okay, who are spreading disinformation. And there are some on the left as well. The incident that you're talking about occurred 2 weeks ago in Michigan. The vice president was on a photo line. There was not a meeting. It was a photo line where she was greeting people. She greeted a group of uncommitted voters. They asked her if she would meet and talk to them about their position, and they support an arms embargo on Israel. By the way, there was someone else who testified right before me. I don't know. This is part where I don't know who was to testify, but we testified. And she also called for an arms embargo. That's not where this administration is. That's not where the vice president is. So obviously that was not what's going to be reflected in the platform, and that's not the vice president's position. She said she'd consider a meeting, and kept walking. All of a sudden, the left champions it as, oh, she supports an arms embargo. And of course, the right champions it as exactly the same thing. Keep in mind, what matters is the truth. That's not what she said. That's not her position. We know her position. And I think it's up to all of us to be ambassadors of the truth. There's a lot of disinformation that's being spewed by our Republican counterparts, the Republican Jewish Coalition. Even in the course of the next 4 days, they will attempt to portray those protesting somewhere out there on the streets as representing our party. Our party is represented by those on the stage, and as I mentioned, the very strong platform that we will be adopting. That's what our party stands for. The people on the streets have the First Amendment right to do so, but they're not going to be in the convention hall for a reason. Their views aren't shared by the members of our party. So it's important that we espouse the truth. Even the Josh Shapiro issue, there is reporting that it was the Trump world, not just the far left, but the Trump world that perpetuated the genocide Josh accusations, the accusations that their anti-Semitism was involved. There's a Bulwark article all about this. It was about a week and a half ago. So it's important that we continue to defend the truth.
Thank you. Was a question here, and then we'll go over to this side. So we'll just switch back and forth.
Thank you.
Larry, will you introduce yourself?
Yes. Okay, my name's Larry Gelman, and I live in Tucson and Aspen. And I wanted to ask a question about the way in which the issue of anti-Semitism and some of these other issues are being weaponized, particularly by the right and particularly by Republicans, in an effort to promote an agenda that is probably unconstitutional in terms of the IHRA definition. 7 of the 11 bullet points are about Israel defining anti-Semitism. Israel didn't exist 75 years ago. And it's important and huge, and I love it. But I'm just saying, it seems as though there are those in the Jewish community among our legacy organizations who are supporting that effort. And I was wondering if you think this is a good thing or a bad thing, or it's going to come back to bite us in the end.
Thank you. That might be, who wants to take that?
So the question specifically is about the IHRA definition?
It's just about that general trend
Well,
of weaponizing.
Well, okay, then I'm happy to just kind of continue the previous answer to say absolutely we are seeing the Republicans attempt to weaponize issues that they know are of importance to the Jewish community, and frankly, they can't speak about democracy, about reproductive rights. Of 88% of Jews, keep in mind, support abortion being legal in all or some cases. They can't talk about those issues because they know their candidates don't align with the vast majority of Jews. Where they think they could make headway, and they will once again prove unsuccessful in making any headway with Jewish voters, is on the issue perhaps of Israel or anti-Semitism. So they continue, in my view, to promote what is false accusations, again, whether it's associating all Democrats with anti-Israel or pro-Palestinian protesters, or saying some of the things that are just patently false about the vice president's record, or taking, very committed public servants like Ilan Goldenberg, and I share Michael's view, who could not be better for this role. And it's actually quite a testament to this campaign that they chose him to be in this role. He is a policy expert on the Middle East, who is now the Jewish liaison for us. It's great. And for them to accuse him of being anything other than the committed public servant that he is, is just preposterous. So I think it's important to recognize it for what it is.
Yeah, it's a campaign, folks. Okay. It's a campaign. They're going to trash us and we're going to trash them. And they're going to accuse us of being too liberal, and we're going to accuse them of being nutbags. This is what happens in the campaigns. Okay. We just need to understand Jews generally by 74, 75% vote for Democrats. We're going to be in that same ballpark. Okay. And I would suggest, as I think about, when you step back for a minute and think about the Biden-Harris 3 years, I don't think anyone could have possibly have had a more pro-Israel record as these two people. And you'll say, well, it wasn't Harris administration. Well, wait a minute. No, that's not how it works. You can't take all the good and then the bad. No, you get the whole package. Okay. She owns the Biden record on the economy, on the border, on all the other things you want to talk about. And she also owns the record on the pro-Israel position that this president has taken. And in particular, this idea that Doug Emhoff spent the last year and a half running around the country and the world talking about anti-Semitism. It's unbelievable. And I mean, Doug was like me as a Jew. I mean, we're like, I'm like I didn't, maybe way more religious than I am, but I go to temple a few times a year. I did become the ambassador of Israel, but nonetheless, Doug did not grow up. Doug did not grow up waking up and say, wow, I'm going to be the second gentleman. I'm going to spend my time talking about anti-Semitism. But make no mistake, if you think that Doug Emhoff could run around the country talking about anti-Semitism without having the approval of his wife, you have another thing coming, okay? Because she, in this particular case, is the boss, okay? And Doug will tell you, she's only doing this because he cares about it, but she supports it. So going back into the definitions and all the discussions around this, the fact of the matter is you have probably the most pro-Israel president and vice president we've seen in a long time at the time that we need it the most.
Gentleman right here.
Hi, David Singer, a delegate from South Florida. It's not an original theory of mine that October 7th happened because the closeness of the Saudi Arabia-Israel deal. And it was a big important issue for the Biden administration, in spite of the fact that Saudi Arabia does not have clean hands, whether it's the killing of Khashoggi and the treatment of women and maybe more involvement in 9/11 than we like to think. But I assume the philosophy of the Biden-Harris administration was you get Saudi Arabia, as you said, Ambassador, you get some of the other Muslim nations, and all of a sudden it coalesces, and maybe they can come up with out of that a two-state solution will be born. But so what is in it for those other Muslim countries? Is it commerce? Is that the motivating factor for this deal? And can commerce get us to a two-state solution?
So it's a very good question, and I answered one question. I happen to have been, I hate it when people say I was in the room, but I was in the room when President Biden came for the 10th time to the state of Israel. And if you remember, we were in the middle of COVID, and as you know, President Biden was quite articulate during the campaign about his views on Saudi Arabia, and certainly on the killing of Khashoggi. That's obviously a public record. He was quite concerned and articulated in some fairly colorful language. He was convinced almost a year and a half ago when he went to Israel for the 10th time to go to Saudi Arabia following the trip. And the reason he was convinced of doing it, he thought it was important to the security of the state of Israel. Okay? He was convinced that normalizing, potentially getting this relationship back was helpful to the security of the state of Israel. That was the only reason he went. And so my view of this is that this potential of a normalization with Saudi Arabia will have knock-on impact and knock-on effect. And not a question about cutting deals with different Muslim countries. But to be clear, Saudi is the big fish in the region. It's an exceptionally important country. It has an exceptionally important influence around the rest of the Muslim world. So I don't know what, to quote, what will happen afterwards, but I fundamentally believe that if possibly, and who knows, you don't know, but if we get to a deal, and yes, I agree with Michael, we got to figure out what is in it for the Palestinians. I spent a lot of time working on the Palestinian issue, okay? The importance of education, healthcare, yes, a pathway to a two-state solution, all the things that I care about as a liberal Jew and whatever you want to call me. So I think this is the pathway to something. We got to get there, but it begins at getting these hostages home, getting a ceasefire, beginning to rebuild Gaza, and then discussion around Saudi normalization.
You got anything? And then
Yeah,
we'll go back that way and then over here. Michael, did you want to add anything?
yeah. I would just quickly add that Israel is an attractive country to lots of folks in the region. Nobody likes the Iranians. You see countries like the Emiratis and the Bahrainis and the Saudis reestablishing relations with Iran. It's not because they like them. It's because at the moment they think this is the best way to co-opt them and basically buy them off to leave them alone. So I think that everybody in the region sees the benefits of a wider security architecture, which absolutely has to involve Israel. I think everybody in the region sees the benefits of the Israeli economy, Israeli tech, all the reasons why somebody would want to be a partner of the state of Israel. Those all apply to the region as well. They have tricky domestic politics that they need to get over. But I think that, you know, the question about whether or not to shun Israel, that's not really a question anymore.
Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a last couple rounds of questions and then we'll throw it back to them. So our Mike, your folks, you're going to run around. Okay, please.
Hello, Rabbi Michael Beals, great state of Delaware, my wife, Dr. Lisa Green, and I'm on the panel this evening to give a benediction after the president. So
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you. That's amazing.
I'm really back in Delaware, all our little kids are inspired. Okay, so question for my wife and question for me, and I'll be short.
Quick. Yep. So we can get everybody in.
You know, all the different caucuses and all the different exciting things she could do for the Democratic Party, and she came to this thing about Palestinian civil rights. And there's nothing like that about any other countries that have problems. Justice for Palestine, yeah. And so anyway, she said, you know, if you're looking at this and you're on the right, you go, this is not the party for me. There's nothing else about Libya or Sudan, just Israel. So I'll put that out there. It says, Shiloh, for you about what do I say to my congregants on the right? There's some Democrats. My question for me is, I'm worried that Netanyahu is really working for the Republican Party, meaning that if you get an agreement, you get a ceasefire, then you get Muslims back, you get all these other young people back, and so that's not in his interest because, you know, so how do you deal with that in the future?
All right. So Netanyahu is working for the Republicans, yes or no? And why is there only a Palestinian caucus? And where are all the other caucuses? There's a question back here. Oh, right. Well, let's go back. Can we go back? Tom, you got to talk. Okay. Real quick. All right, Con. Real quick. One back here and one there, and then we'll close it up with here. Go ahead, Tom. Quick questions.
Question, from a political standpoint, anybody who says that they're gonna vote for Trump because they care about Israel should be asked, do you really trust the most erratic president we've had in history who says,
All right, Michael, that
Netanyahu, because he called to congratulate Joe Biden. That's a more saving question. But policy, what happens, Michael Koplow, you said that the United States is dedicated to this two-state solution as the rest of the world. Obviously, and you also said Israel is in a very, very, very different place, more since I covered it. So what happens when you've got the two countries going in such dramatically different directions?
all right, what back here? Can you run back there? There we go, right behind you.
My question is relating to sort of the day after that situation. My name is Elliot Hartstein. I live in Chicago area. Primarily, Mr. Ambassador, I was wondering if you can share what your thoughts are as to who and how can there be a meaningful Palestinian leadership other than Hamas, and what role does the United States play, or should the United States play in trying to...
That might be going for Michael. All right, let's get this young man here. So we get somebody younger than me.
Thanks for the panel. Mohit Agrawal, PhD student at Yale, delegate. How should Democrats from the White House down to mayors deal with campus protests this fall?
Okay. All right. So I don't know who wants to do campus, but why don't we go to the
The
caucuses,
caucus issue.
whether or
Hi,
not
Rabbi.
where we are on on a couple of the questions around the policy issues, and then you get Netanyahu and you can toss the coin of
Okay.
who gets the campus.
Great. Okay. So there's a lot of Jewish organizational programming throughout the convention. JDCA itself is hosting, and you're welcome to come back every night for the next 4 nights, a panel and then a schmooze after. From there, we can make our way to the United Center. But also other organizations are hosting it. Now, the DNC itself is also hosting 2 Jewish community events. One discussion is going to focus on Israel. The other is going to focus on domestic policy issues. So those events are happening, and I believe that might be the pairing that you were looking for. Is there something for the Jews? Yes, there are 2 things, plus a bunch of other stuff.
Michael.
So on the gap between Israel and the United States, yeah, it's a huge gap at the moment. And I think we have to keep in mind that Israel is still very much living on October 7th. There are still 115 hostages in Gaza. They are not in any post-traumatic syndrome. They are in trauma. Now, that will not be the case forever, but I think that what's important now is not to try and cause some sort of clash between the United States and Israel where we demand there must be 2 states tomorrow, and the Israelis say, you guys are insane, we're never going to move toward 2 states. I think that the answer is to move in very incremental steps to figure out how you can move things closer in a way that safeguards Israel's security and that does not trip any Israeli wires at the moment. And over time, things will get better and we'll be back to a spot where hopefully can be discussed. Quickly, the question on Palestinian leadership. Palestinian leadership right now is not good. And we're not just talking about Hamas. When it comes to the PA, it is autocratic, it's corrupt, it's lost lots of legitimacy among its people. The Palestinians have to do a really good job of building things back in a sustainable way. There needs to be Palestinian leadership that has the trust of the Palestinian people and that can actually operate on the world stage in a way that they can also deal with Israel. That's a job first and foremost for the Palestinians to figure out. I hope that they will, but I don't think that in any way it's inevitable that Palestinian leadership is going to be Hamas. I think that when the dust settles post-October 7th, Hamas is going to be in a situation where they find themselves deeply unpopular among lots of Palestinians. And the question then is going to be how you get to a better Palestinian leadership as opposed to accepting Hamas as the inevitable leader of the Palestinian national movement.
Tom, Netanyahu, Republican or Democrat, and you get the coin clip on campus.
I'm not going to get into Bibi Netanyahu's head. It's like that would be a bridge too far for me. I think ultimately he is a political animal. Okay, he knows more about politics in America than even I do. I used to sit in hundreds of meetings with him where he knows which congressional races up and down. One thing I can tell you, he was reading the polls. So if he thought for a minute, 45 days ago that Donald Trump was going to be president, just look at the polls now, and he may have a little bit of a different thought process about who may be the president of the United States. But beyond that, we'll deal with the political wins for Netanyahu at a later point. Let me just talk just 1 second on college campus. It's really a huge issue. I have been talking about this issue way before October 7th. We've had a problem on college campuses for a long, long time about making sure that we get to those individuals who are under 30 and talking about the importance of the state of Israel. Okay, we've done a lousy job as a community, in my humble view. Okay, and we've rested on our laurels. And listen, we can talk about the importance of organizations like AIPAC or J Street or Communities UJA. The fact of the matter is, we have not done as well as we should be doing about how we communicate to these kids, not necessarily your kids or your generation or your kids. We've just done a terrible job, in my view, of talking about you can do 2 things. You can support the state of Israel and the security of the state of Israel, and you can support the Palestinian people. That's okay. I was the American ambassador to the state of Israel. You can say, I want to get rid of Hamas. I want to kill Hamas, but at the same time, I want to feed innocent Gazans. That's okay. And by the way, this fight is not with the Palestinian people. This fight is with Hamas and the extremists. And we as Jews have the responsibility to communicate that way. It's hard to argue when you communicate that way. So that's what we need to do. And that is why I am so proud that Kamala Harris is going to be the Democratic nominee, and he's going to be potentially the next president of the United States, because I care about what's going on in college campuses, and she's going to be a great messenger to say exactly what I said by saying it as the president of the United States.
Thank you for that incredible setting the bar so high for the next 11 after this panels. What you have provided for us is our ability to articulate exactly what we need to say, how we need to talk to all of our friends and our foes alike, because those are equally important. I think you've given us some language to talk to our kids, which is also a huge problem for all of us, but we could not have had the bar set higher. I want to thank Liz. I won't go into anything else, but thank you, Liz, for being the bar, for Ambassador Nides, Michael, Halie, all of you. Really, your words and your thoughts and your positions are the things that are going to carry us through, not just today, not just tomorrow, but for the next 87 days, 79 days, and we're going to get it done. So thank you.